This presentation is brought to you by the Pacific Division Sheltering Leadership. Several housekeeping items. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted tonight on YouTube. The link is in the email that you received earlier. You should enter your own hours for this meeting. Your mic and camera have been disabled. If you'd like your questions to be answered by our expert panelist, please enter them in the Q&A. That's the one that next to the chat box. The chat scrolls too fast and we won't be able to catch all the questions. We will answer your questions at the end of this presentation. Feel free to use the chat to say hi to each other. We have 8 weekly sessions this year and we're halfway through. We're hoping that we don't have too many disasters and we can finish all of the 8 of them. I'd like to welcome today's presenters. We have Jane and Chris. Jane has been a volunteer with the Southern California region since 2012. She is a shelter manager and the regional training lead. Chris has been a volunteer with the California Goat Country since 2021. She is also a shelter manager and the regional sheltering program lead. Both were deployed to the Los Angeles wildfires, and they have extensive experiences in sheltering. Jane and Chris, please take it away.
Thank you. I am Chris Hitchcock, and I will start this series off this evening. Yes, I am a shelter manager. Sheltering is one of my big passions, and I thoroughly enjoy it. When I first joined Red Cross, they said, "What would you like to do?" And I said, "I don't know." And they said, "Well, we have a program called DAT, Disaster Activity, whatever, where you might be called in the middle of the night to go to a house fire and help people." And I said, "Ugh, you're going to call me at 2 a.m. and wake me up?" I said, "No, thanks." So I first started out in education. I did the Pedro and pillowcase and quickly moved to sheltering. Now I am quite happy to be woken up and say, "Hey, we need a shelter set up," and start working on it. And I do spend all night awake in some shelters sometimes. So just because I wouldn't get up at 2, now I'm paying for that. So this evening we are going to go over some tips and things to remember about sheltering. We have objectives for tonight. We're going to talk about getting yourself ready to go, how to prepare yourself for the job, understanding disaster response, some useful tools, coaching, recognition, and what leadership is doing at the headquarters. We are covering things from the first time deployment person. You've never been in a shelter, but you're getting ready to go. And for those who have been in a shelter, things to help your experience be better. Next. So when you're given an assignment to go to a DRO, you get an email from your workforce person who says, "Okay, now you need to get a mission card and here's some information." And hopefully they have added a link to the IAP, the Incident Action Plan. And if they do that, you click on that link and it gives you all kinds of information about the disaster and the DR you're on. So you need to look that over, see what kind of disaster it is, see what the hardship qualities are, see it has a list of different people you can contact. If you're traveling, it's always good to know who the travel contact is and the housing contact. So keep that list handy as you get ready to go on the DR. I've been on several where I've taken off in a plane and had no idea what was going to happen when I landed. Fortunately, I get a transportation text before I land and a lodging text. So those things, if you don't get and you're there, you can use the IAP for numbers on people to call. You can always call back to where your home territory is and ask for help there. The IAP will also tell you what kind of disaster it is, and it will have some helpful hints about, is this a big fire, some cultural things, because if you live in the West, going to a disaster response in the East might be totally culturally different. And somebody in the East coming to California might say, what are you doing with all these animals? Why are people showing up with their horses and all the rest of it, which is common for us. So reading the IAP gives you a good idea of what's going on. You can scroll through it and see if you know anybody who's working at that DR. That's always useful. And it does have different tools on the IAP that are listed that will help you in your where you're going. You want to check the weather of the place where you're going. I live in a location where the weather right now is 50 to 60. If it's 60 and the sun is shining, it's super hot, but the rest of the time it's not. And I found myself going to another location where temperatures were getting warmer. They were getting close to 100. So I have to change my wardrobe from what I usually wear in California to where I will be going. Do check the weather. If you have a Red Cross email, that's good. And if you have several gaps, you may want to check on if you have an RC care gap and towards the end of your deployment, you're no longer needed in a shelter, you might switch jobs. You might be involved in logistics. You might be involved in something else. Another thing to check is your phone. I know here in California, if I'm not deployed anywhere, I have my phone set to, if it's an unknown call, please take it to voicemail. And if it's important, they'll leave me a message. But on a DRO, I might be getting phone calls from people I don't know. And if I send them to my voicemail, it just slows the process down. So do check your phones and make sure that you have them set so you can receive information. You also want to make sure you have phone chargers and any other kind of chargers you might need. Check and see if you need to take sunglasses. If you're going to a place like Louisiana, you might want to take bug spray and a hat and other items to help with the temperatures and the climate. If you have time when you get there, it's always good to check the person you're following. That doesn't always work, but if you do overlap, it's good to get talk to them so you get an idea of what's going on before you start. Always remember to take snacks. You don't want to be hangry. And there's nothing worse than getting somewhere and there's no restaurant open, no food available, and you are super hungry. So take snacks with you, not the kind that might melt if you're going to an extremely warm temperature country, but weather, but because I've had chocolate melt and it's a big mess. But something that you can grab in case you are not able to get food someplace else. Next. Some of the things that you might need to know when you're on the response, when you get there, is we don't always, not everybody has to submit a 6409, which is for getting supplies. In larger operations now, there is a truck logistics sends around to you every day with certain supplies on it that you can just ask for when it shows up. And each DR seems to have a different way of getting supplies that you might need. But 6409s have been around for a while, and if you're not familiar, look them up on OneSource to see how they get filled out. you can always ask your supervisor for information on that and how they work. Technology can be different at each shelter. Sometimes you hopefully you have a computer, hopefully you have a hotspot or internet, Wi-Fi, and hopefully you have a phone. If you don't, you have to request these, and sometimes it takes a little bit to get them. But if you take your phone and you always have it charged, hopefully, then it's not as much a problem. Also, when you first arrive, be sure you take the training that's offered at the headquarters. That helps you get to know what's on the DR, and they can give you more information about the culture. I know when I went to Hawaii, they had some videos that explained the different parts of the Hawaiian culture, which made it a whole lot easier to talk to our clients. We knew a little bit about where they were coming from and how they think. We assume sometimes that people know exactly, they're just like us, they have the same culture, but that's not necessarily true. Oh, let's see. Rental cars. That's something else. If you have been assigned a rental car when you arrive, it's usually at the airport, and you walk over to the car rental and you ask for a car, give them your name and Red Cross, and they will assign you a car. But just because they assign you a car at the airport does not mean that that will be your car for the whole time. When you get to headquarters, you give them your car information and the keys, and then they will assign a car to people depending on their need. They're hoping that you can carpool with different people to get from place to place. Sometimes you do have a car and it's assigned to you. There's a 6409T, which is filled out. If you haven't ever done that, hopefully headquarters can help you get that. The shelter people can help you, and the transportation people. Um, just remember that you need to be able to fill gas with your MPC card, MassCare card that you get, and mission card. And be sure to use a mission card when you go to fill gas in your car. One hint is don't put the card in the pump at the gas station, take it inside. If you use it at the pump, they'll put a hold on it for a couple of days, and then you won't have the money available to use. And another thing, Teams, you need to know how to use Teams. So much of the information is provided through Teams communication. And so check that out if you've never used Teams. Next. One of the really important things about sheltering is being able to use Skya. And if you've not used Skya, you need to bone up on how it works. You can go to OneSource and you can find videos on how to use it. If that still is hard for you to do check with your CDPM or somebody in your region or territory and see if they can give you a hands-on how to use Skya. It is a shelter client information application. It is not an app you put on your phone, but it is an application. You go to a website. If possible, it's good to have this on your phone. And if you're technologically uh, not impaired, but if you're like me, you sometimes need help with technology, there are people around who can help you. You will need to use your volunteer connection in order to access Skya. So make sure you know your volunteer name and password in order to use it. Cell phones are helpful with Skya if in emergencies, when you're not near a computer and you're not near the Wi-Fi that might be available, you can often get Skya on your cell phone. Cell phones are provided at the shelters. There's usually one cell phone, one computer, and a hotspot. If you hear that shelter phone ring, please answer it. The person, it may not have somebody close by who can answer it, but it is the phone that's been assigned to the shelter, and somebody on the other end may need help, and you need to be able to help them. If you don't have answers to their questions, find somebody else in the shelter who can help you answer those questions. Hardship codes, please look at the hardship codes and make sure that you're not impacted by any of those. If you need if you have trouble climbing stairs and one of the hardship codes is a lot of stair climbing, please don't sign up to go on the DR because that just makes it harder for the rest of us to help everybody out. So do check those and make sure that you're able to do everything that you need to a hardship code. Those are found usually on the email that gets sent to you with your job assignment. They will ask you that, and your health thing that you check off, you'll get a text message or an email that says do your health intake process. And if there's anything on there that you feel you might not be able to do, please wait for the next DR. I am sure there are going to be plenty of DRs in this year. We have not had a break in disasters. If there's any problems you have with staff or you're having trouble with your accommodations or anything, please contact Staff Relations. You can find their number on the IAP, which is the handy thing that you need to, if you can't access it on your phone, print a copy of one, at least the first couple of pages, to take with you that have the phone numbers. Don't wait until it's too late to get your issue solved. And if you are becoming overwhelmed by the situation, please talk to spiritual care or mental health. They can find their numbers also on the IAP. Next. And always be a team player. If you need to, you can work on developing special skills, various skills, different knowledge that you have that you take to it. If you have somebody on your team that you think is doing something that you wouldn't do that way, if it's not life-threatening, if it's not a deterrent to the overall operation, maybe it's better to just back off of it, accept it, and go on and keep going. Everybody comes to a DR with different ideas and different skills and different talents. So we are all volunteers and we're all trying to do our best to help the clients. When new people come into your team, welcome them, get to know them, share your information with them, and make them feel part of it. If there are some solutions to problems in your shelter, be creative and offer them where you see you can serve as a mentor and a model for your fellow volunteers. Anticipate what you might need and what other people might need, and always ask for help or for suggestions from other people because they might have really great ideas that you haven't thought of. At the same time, make sure you're taking care of yourself first. If you don't feel well, if you're having troubles with something, talk to somebody. If you get sick, please take time to stay back at the shelter, wherever you are lodging, and try not to spread whatever's happening around to other people. So do be the best person you can and keep a smile on your face. Really, if you smile, things will be better for everybody. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jane. She's going to walk you through the next steps.
Hey, thanks, Chris. I appreciate that. So next slide, please. And I do want to say we have quite the plethora of volunteers from Alaska, from one end of our country to the other. I'm down here in San Diego, and it looks like we have somebody from Alaska, we have Montana. I mean, it is amazing how far and wide. Oh, there we go. We have Idaho. I really appreciate everyone coming on tonight because it really does create a sense of, having members that we can, meet out on the job. Like Eway said, when we, deployed to LA, I've worked with, online with a lot of different people in our division, but I haven't seen them face to face. So it was interesting meeting people. So that's all part of, being able to, work as a team, as Chris was just saying. And that's really, what we're looking for in this capacity series that, we are putting on. And part of, Chris just covered being a team player, but then I'm going to talk about, being honest with our management. And this has come up in several DRs I have been on because, a lot of times we get very excited about things that are going on. And really, when we're trying to push the information up, all we really want are the facts. And I know we get very excited and emotional about everything, but that's what those little notebooks that we can keep in our pocket or keep on ourselves, just stick to the facts. What happened? What time? Where was it? Who were the players? Was anyone hurt or anything? So we really want to make sure if things happen, and we all know different things happen in a shelter, but we want to make sure our management knows. We always talk about pushing it up. Just when your shelter headquarters lead calls, and every time they call everything is fine, it kind of sends up a red flag because everything isn't always fine. So be honest. There's always, we try to make sure we balance everything. And when I say frankness and sensitivity, if you've taken care of a situation, then just report that. We want to make sure that our management understands what we're doing at the shelter. There are no grades in this. There's no, winning or losing. We all are here to support each other. And the more that you can pass on to your management of what is happening at the shelter, the more they can do forward planning and letting other activities know so that you can get more help at your site. And also, what this also does, I can't talk about having a trusting relationship enough because that's really what we're going for. We want to know that, if you're working in headquarters and you have, a lot of your team out in the field, that you can trust them to give you the information that you need. And you're not going to be sitting in a meeting and find out something happened and you had no idea of what's going on. So, stick to the facts of what is going on. It could be with clients or with our own volunteers. And if it is with volunteers, we need to make sure that we get, some good information on that. All right, next slide, please. And here we go with coaching. Chris was talking about, mentoring and meeting our new volunteers. But, coaching our volunteers really helps because, as she was talking about, we all come with different skills. and a lot of our policies get changed. Recently we had a policy that none of the personal information on our clients is going to be written down. We're just using Skya. And so you want to make sure that, everyone, is up on Skya, they know how to log in. And if they can't get in, then we try to remedy that. So we want to make sure we're talking to our sheltering lead to find solutions if we don't have internet or cell phone coverage, at our site. What are we going to do? That's really for our management to come up with those policies. We just want to make sure if there's any new policies, maybe, check OneSource, check the sheltering toolkit, check with the Skya on OneSource. It comes with a wealth of information. And, we want to make sure we want to be clear of what that outcome is going to be. So when we're coaching our volunteers, as Chris said previous, it doesn't always have to be the perfect way. There's many, many ways to get one thing done. And so I do struggle when I hear volunteers say, well, in Southern California, we don't do it that way. And it just kind of gives me, it makes my heart hurt because there's many different ways. And so make sure, it's fine. Whatever way that they're doing it is fine. We're all going to get to the same end result. And a lot of times I always say, there's a lot of different tasks on what we're doing, a lot of different roles we can play and expectations. Chris was talking about, picking up the cell phone. Why not? Offer to do that. Everyone, we can all try a new role and it's all good for us. So we just want to make sure that the volunteer understands, bring him to the why. Why are we doing this? Why do we keep, why do people keep calling that phone? Because the work that we do really matters. And that's why I always try to get people, so they understand what their expectations are when they arrive on the job. And also, we also have shadowing. Make sure if there is time and you've always wondered what it's like to be a supervisor or work in headquarters, offer it if it's not too crazy busy and there's an opportunity. We really want you guys to see every different thing that's going on. Just so you know, none of it is a secret. We want everyone to come and join the party all the time. Next slide, please. I know I see there. I'm trying to ignore the chat thing that's going so fast. But also part of, what we were just talking about is you really represent the Red Cross 24 hours a day. And that includes when you are in the lodging, when you're in the shelter, the staff shelter. Just because, you're in a staff shelter does not mean you get to, turn into an obnoxious person and start demanding things of your other coworkers. We're all in this together. I have unfortunately seen some very bad examples of, what people, how they act in hotels. You really do represent the Red Cross and people see you. So when you're done with your job, you take off your vest, and especially if you're going out to dinner or having a drink, make sure that you don't have any Red Cross paraphernalia on. Just make sure you're very conscious of what it is you do. And also be careful about talking about, especially if you're out in public or in a restaurant. Make sure you're not talking specifically about things. You have no idea who is sitting next to you and how that could possibly affect them. So your behavior is a reflection on all of us. I know I'm sounding preachy now, but it really is important to understand that. Even when you're flying to the job, some people expect certain things from the airline just because they're fully kitted out in their Red Cross gear. But you know what? I don't expect anything. I'm just a human being on that plane, because my mission card will pay for my luggage. I do not expect, the airline to give me free luggage just because, I'm volunteering for the Red Cross. So, I just want to make sure that, we're all good when we arrive. And also, when I say disguise your emotions, you're going to hear and listen sometimes to a lot of really hard stories. And the biggest thing we have to learn is to not respond dramatically or in any way that may cause more problems. We are all in mass care. This is what we're doing. We are doing for the most amount of people. So we cannot get, caught up in saying that, oh no, I can't leave my shift because, I've made a connection to this one client and they depend on me. We want to make sure that we hear things, we pass information on. If other activities like health services, mental health, or disaster spiritual care needs to get involved, let them get down to the granular level of taking care of the individual clients because that's what their job is. Okay, next slide, please. And then, of course, once we've accomplished all these lovely things and you guys have followed every procedure possibly that there is, we love to be recognized. Don't be afraid to recognize your fellow volunteers. Do not expect the management to just be the one who gives out gotchas or just lets people know how great of a job they do. Hopefully you have a meeting, some sort of meeting, or, you could even email it to headquarters. You could email it to the mass care chief. You just want to recognize how your team is doing. You want to recognize that they're doing well, or, even if it's one little thing, it's the one thing that makes a difference. And I know, sometimes, we all just have our heads down and we're working as hard as we can. And it really does feel good every once in a while to stand to the side and, have the light shining on you. So celebrate that. We really need to make sure that we constantly recognize the positive things because we sometimes get in these chat groups and conversations and then we get caught up in these day-to-days and we really just don't even have time to thank our volunteers. And I'm going to be honest with you, I take thank you cards. I've got some Red Cross thank you cards actually, and I just take a minute and I just write a thank you card. I promise you, when I go home, I've already forgotten if I've already done that because my brain power is so small. But even if it's just something easy like, thank you for traveling so far to deploy, your work and attitude were positive and appreciated. You were an asset to the clients and your team and your leaders, and I hope you'll come back. These are people have taken 2 weeks out of their life to come and either help you in your region or you've gone and helped them in theirs. It really does help. So don't be afraid of taking a minute and recognizing your fellow workers with you. It could even be during this at the staff shelter, because if you're staying at a staff shelter, they're working really hard to make your life better there. All righty, next slide, please, now that I've talked that one out. So I'm going to stand on a box on this one. So I do want everyone to get an evaluation when you're done with your job. Good, bad, or ugly, it doesn't matter. But I want you as the volunteer to help with that. You can be part of it. You can be part of making sure you get a good evaluation and an evaluation that actually indicates what you do. Now, your supervisor is going to be writing your evaluation, and there's a chance, your supervisor rarely sees you at work. And so I try to take a little time every day, and I write like 3 sentences of what I did that day to make sure at the end I can then submit it and say, hey, this is actually what I did. Because I promise you, on day 2, when I'm writing things down, on day 14, I cannot remember a single thing I did on day 1 and 2. So that's why I do these 3 sentences. I just start, either a note section on my phone, I do a Word document on my computer. You can even do it in your email. So you want to make sure you as your own volunteer keep track of what you are doing, because I just want you to get the really good performance evaluation. I want you to be proactive on it. And I want you to include things like, what was the setting? Everybody's setting is different. It could be in the city, it could be remote, it could be that you got moved, every 2 days. And I admit I've been the sheltering person at headquarters, and I had to move volunteers every 2 days. And I felt bad, but somebody needed to do it. But I promised them at the end I would make sure that they would get a really good evaluation, because that's all part of it. Moving every 2 days. I get it that their supervisor isn't required to write an evaluation, but somebody has to. But I needed them to keep track of how many times I even moved them. So keep track of all this stuff for yourself. And then I always say, what did you do? Your deployment, and make sure that you share that. We all walk away being proud of something, even if it's just that you succeeded in coming to work every single day, because it's really hard work, and then of course, be honest. None of us are perfect. I like to say, make sure if there's a issue or something that needs corrected, be honest with it. Yeah, I promise you, I have never been able to deploy and not gone home and had more things I needed to work on than what I did positively. So don't be afraid of being critical of yourself, because that's all part of our growth in being better volunteers. Next slide, please. All right. So this is a little precursor to next week, I understand. So when I want to talk about what goes on at headquarters, there are so many meetings that are going on, and you're trying to get a hold of someone and no one is answering their phone. Well, I promise you, the leadership at headquarters, they are working super hard. They're trying to meet all the needs at your shelter, because you keep telling them what your needs are. You're making sure that they know what is going on at your shelter. So again, they can include our community partners and all the other activities, and they're planning. They're working on the plan for the future staffing. They're trying to attend all these daily meetings, and they're working with all the activities that are in headquarters. And there's, of course, in your IEP, you're seeing what the goals of the days are. They're trying to achieve those goals for everyone. So make sure if there's something that, critical that needs to be done, we have daily meetings with our sheltering leadership. There is a daily shelter report, and there are a lot of different, things that go into that daily shelter report. You could even help fill it out. It's all it's in Skya. It's all part of the learning of what's going on in the shelter. Of course, there is fulfillment. That's the logistics task that comes by if there's a DR with a level 4 and above, and they bring us cool stuff every day, or whatever we ask for the day before, if they can find it. And those are things that at these certain meetings, that at headquarters, they're trying to find out if all the needs are met. And then of course, all these activities keep coming to the sheltering headquarters person, and they want to know the counts, the locations, the updates. And it's just a lot of of people pulling on them a lot. And we want to make sure that everyone understands that even though you think that they're sitting around doing nothing, next week you're going to hear even more information on what happens at our headquarters. And then, of course, there's the 215. I actually won't go into it too much, but I want to go into it a little bit. So the information we put on the 215, and we have to, this is something that happens at headquarters, and we fill it out every day. And it is for the operational period, the forward operational period. So it's not for the day we're filling it out, it's for the next day. And where that information goes is on the IAP. So I know a lot of times you're looking at the IEP and you're like, oh man, the name of the supervisor is wrong on that. But at the moment we submitted it, that's who we thought was going to be the supervisor for the next day. So please understand, it gets submitted every single day. They work really hard to make sure the information is correct. That's why a lot of times they call you and they want to know how many cots you have, how many blankets, comfort kits. All this information can be put in the 215 to be submitted. And it is a lot of, it goes into a lot of different directions. And every activity has to fill this out every single day. And then, of course, we're trying to plan for the next 72 hours. Because when you're looking forward, the staff for if you've deployed, to get more staff, it can take 4 days to get more staff on site. So there's this constant forward planning happening that we're trying to look ahead and make sure that we're getting everything, that we need at the time we need it. Because there could be, multiple major DRs going on across the United States, and the one you're working on isn't getting the most people responding to it to deploy. And so that's why we're all doing this shelter capacity series. So we have some great volunteers that can deploy. And then, of course, the other thing that goes on at headquarters is they're reviewing the performance evaluations, and either they can reject them and send them back, or they're approving them. That is one of the big jobs that goes on. And I just can't stress that enough, because I want everyone to go home with a very good performance evaluation. All right, next slide, please.
One second.
All right, we're going to do a little exercise, and this can be in the chat. And part of the reason it's in the chat, because everybody doesn't have a mic or anything. But I wanted to have you guys think about, you're going to deploy to Baton Rouge, Louisiana. It's a hurricane, and you're going as the shelter service associate. So what is it that you are going to need, or pack or anything, or think about? Because we want to make sure it's a meaningful experience. I have been to Baton Rouge. I kind of understand it a tiny bit, but a lot of us have never been to Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So in the chat, if you guys could list, what are some of the things you are going to need after a hurricane hits Louisiana? All right. Alan says earplugs. I don't know, Alan. I'm assuming that's a staff shelter. And then, of course, we have the health codes, and the weather. Oh my gosh. I'm assuming after a hurricane, it is so hot and muggy. Make sure you are packed appropriately. And as Chris said previous, pack the mosquito spray. You really will need all the bug spray that you can take. And of course, really sturdy shoes. That's a great one, because you just don't know what you're going to be walking. I'm hoping all of the shelters are in safe locations, but I'll be honest with you, I've seen some shelters that we've opened on the East Coast that make me a little concerned. And of course, I like the hand fan. I like that because it could be hot. I think in North Carolina last year, they had shelters open that didn't have air conditioning. Oh, it makes me just too hot to believe, but that can happen, and if you look at the hardship codes, you can find out, are there power issues? We want to make sure if you bring your phone and everything, you have chargers to go with it. You want to make sure, that you can charge everything. Bring those external chargers to make sure that you are set. So if you need anything charged, I like the watertight shoes. That's a good one. And, chapstick, towels, hats, batteries, water purifier. I admit, Daniel, I have never brought a water purifier, but I do have a life straw that I could bring. That's one thing you could bring. But you guys have listed some really good ideas. We just want to make sure. I do like, Kathleen, you added carbs to keep your sugar up. When it is that humid out, it's so humid, it's insane. And you're really losing a lot of salt. And so make sure that you're replacing, make sure you're eating healthy, make sure that you have the appropriate gear. And the other thing is, there could be a language barrier. Um, in Baton Rouge, they do speak English, but they also speak some dialects of French and Creole that I admit I don't understand, and I don't know that Google Translate is going to help me. So those, even trying to understand everyone, because there's a lot of bugs there. And you know what else they have? They have alligators. So just be careful around, water with the alligators and everything. It's just something they have. It's pretty amazing. So just, be careful on going to places you have never been before. And with that, Eway, I would like to open it up to find out what questions we have for Chris and I.
Thank you so much, Jane. It is so lovely to hear all your tips and tricks and things to bring and remember. Thank you so much, Jane and Chris, for presenting with us. And honestly, this is probably the most interactive sessions that I've seen. You have a lot of hearts, you have a lot of thumbs up, you have lots of questions and lots of chat. So let's get into it. We might not be able to get through all the questions. If we don't, we'll go ahead and send you emails with the answers to the questions. Let's go to the question currently we have in the chat earlier. My computer is having some problems today that I'm not able to maneuver. Give me 2 seconds. I saw a question early on that was buried earlier. Okay, question. If a shelter closes and there are no other fires nearby, is it required to stay on greater than 50 miles for the remainder of the 2-week deployment?
Okay, that's very specific to your deployment. So I would have to say, are you working from home? Is that the 50-mile thing that I understand that you're, staying on? Because the 50-mile thing, I guess I would need a little bit more information. I don't see the question. I'm sorry, there's way too much in here for me to.
I know, I'm scrolling back as well. And team, please do me a favor, do all of us a favor. If you have question, please type into the Q&A. I just saw several more came up. It just scrolls way too fast. I'm not able to catch any of that if it's in the chat. Kim Taylor, that's your question. Do you want to come off mute or raise your hand so I can find you, so I can have you unmute to ask your question?
I am going to say, Eway, that part of being a shelter worker is just because the shelter closed doesn't mean we're going to let everyone go, because we could put you on as a standby. It doesn't mean we don't appreciate your time, but we really need people on standby in case a fire breaks out. Until the fire is out and the DR is over, there's a lot of times we are asked by leadership to have a standby team ready to go. And I know it's very boring, but those are some of the most important jobs, so that in the middle of the night, when, of course, it's always the middle of the night, when we have to go open another shelter, we have people ready to go. If that helps that question.
Anyway, for times like that, it's always good. I know I take a book. I have a knitting project that's small that will fit in almost anything, and I take that in case I end up sitting someplace because I'm waiting. Or you can take Edge classes online. There's a lot of things you can do while you're waiting.
Thank you so much. Thank you for covering multiple topics on whether we cover lodging for 50 miles or more, depending on the situation and depending on the disaster relief operation, and also talking about the standby shelters. Okay, let's go to the next question in the chat. Is it common during the DRO, disaster relief operation, that people get new supervisor changes several times?
Yes.
Yeah, yes, yes. They can change, the supervisor can change, your whole team could be moved and changed. Yes. I was just up in LA doing staffing and I change people around all the time. So yeah, we really like to keep teams together, but it always doesn't happen.
You might
Thank you
come
so
on.
much.
You might come on to the operation a week after your supervisor does, and your supervisor has 1 week left and they are ready to go home. You'll get a new supervisor.
Thank you. So it is extremely common. We talked about language lines or interpretations in this chat, and there is a page that you can dial. There's a language line we can use. Let me see if I'm missing anything here. Okay, Cynthia just posted the remote interpretation services. I don't see any more in the chat for questions. Let me go to Q&A. Let's go to the first one. Okay. When starting up a shelter, is there a pre-filled out 6409, the disaster resource request form, or what to order, or does everything come with a setup?
I'll take this. It depends on your region.
Right.
I can only talk Southern California. Um, we don't have the 6409s pre-ready because we don't know where the location is going to be, but they can be done. Don't tell logistics I'm saying this. They can be done if we're opening a shelter after we get the trailer going and all of the stuff there. We can always, backfill all the 6409s for opening a shelter. The most important part is our client first care. Shelterings are logistics is not going to lose their mind if we don't have every 6409 in gear in the first 24 hours.
Thank you. And a follow-up question, can you touch a little bit about who submits the 6409 and also the process of every shelter every day? The E3 process, fulfillment team?
Jane,
You know
want to
what?
take?
How about this? Is there anyone on here that is an expert or has done this with much more ease than myself? We have quite the group here today. So I don't see anyone jumping with their hand up. So the fulfillment process, Kim Falk just put her hand up.
Okay, 1 second. Let me allow you, Mike. 1 second, please. Go ahead, Kim. Kim Falk, go ahead.
Muted her.
Kim, you're able to come off mute now. Okay, Jean, why don't you take that? We have 7 minutes left and we have quite a few questions left.
Okay, on fulfillment, we put in, so the idea for fulfillment is they're coming every day to your location. So the day before, let's say today is, I don't even know what today is, Wednesday, you're going to submit what you're going to need for tomorrow. So when you're going to fill out whatever their process is, and you need to know what they already have on the truck. I know there's a list that already says, what they normally stock, but there's a chance it could change in regards to what the situation is and what the needs are. So you just submit what it is that you need tomorrow, and then they go out and get it, and it arrives tomorrow when they drop off any other things you need with fulfillment. So they try to hit every location every day. And it's very good. That doesn't mean they can work miracles. They can only get what they can get in the local area. They do use Amazon. I hope that answers your question. And it's only for a level 4 and above.
Thank you so much. And another thing to remind everyone is remember the initiation phase when the disaster first started. We are not going to expect every item that you request. We are going to have that item. So be patient, have grace. Next question. Let's see. We have two phones. One is a shelter phone, one is a Uber phone. What is the standard for clients using the shelter phone to make calls?
Chris, I'll take this one. Okay, so I have no idea what the Uber phone is, but I have a feeling that's not gonna, Uber's changing the way, we're doing it a little different, how we do it with Uber, because we're going to be ordering transportation through Skya. But the shelter phone is very specific. It's attached to the site. It's listed on the IAP, and that is all part of not having your personal information not be out there, so that when you roll off the job, you just hand off the phone to someone else. It works so nice for day shift, night shift. Everyone knows the same phone number, and they just call that one number. I love having a shelter phone on site, and that way when you go home, nobody has your personal information to continue to call you. I hope that answers your question. And someone has their hand up.
Right, Jane, Carol, I did see your question. Jane, a follow-up is that I think what Robin meant is the client authorized to use a shelter phone if they have to make an emergency call?
Um, I'm not sure I would hand them the phone. I could make the call for them. I'm always afraid of letting my fingers off the phone. I mean, I'll give it to another volunteer, but it will tend to walk away. But I would like to make the call for them if I can, if especially if need be.
Thank you
I
so
know
much.
we can't send them out to a phone booth anymore. There's none.
Thank you so much, Jane. And Robin, if you do have further situations when the client needs phone or you have multiple client needs to make phone calls, it is always good to bring up to your supervisor so then we can bring external partners with their phones so then we can distribute phones. We do have disasters that we bring in external partners such as AT&T, Verizon's that they can distribute phones. Carol, I do see your hand up. However, we only have 3 minutes left. Do you mind to put your comments or question either in the Q&A or chat so we can capture that? Let's go to the next question. Should we wear our Red Cross shirt or ID badge when flying or picking up rentals or into the hotels if that is our lodging location?
Chris, do you want to answer this one?
What was the question again?
Is it okay for us to wear our Red Cross shirt or badge when we are traveling to show that we're responding to a disaster?
There are mixed opinions about that, because there have been incidents in the past where somebody wearing a Red Cross shirt or whatever was involved in something that was negative to the Red Cross. So we don't want to give that. But when you're meeting people at the airport when you're getting to a disaster response, it helps to have name badges or something that says Red Cross. Otherwise, you're in this big airport trying to figure out who you're going to meet. Sometimes I put a badge on when I get to the airport, my name tag, so that people will know, but I don't necessarily wear it. And can I make a answer to a question that was in the Q&A that I happened to see that's a little different?
Go ahead.
There was one about if you go to the shelter, you go to a DR as a shelter worker, but you also have a recovery gap. You can only be put on the recovery gap for that DR once you're given permission. So if they take you off of sheltering and put you into recovery, they will go through a process that allows you to do that. But it's not automatic.
Thank you, Chris, for answering that. I skipped that purposely because there was recovery. I was planning to follow up with Robin afterwards. Okay, one more question. We're actually time's up, but we'll take one more question. Is there something in the slides or in the incident action plan to talk about the importance of stand up and stand down for each day for all the entire workforce team?
In the IEP, they're always going to list the stand-up meeting that they're having. They usually have one every day. It's different with every DR. Some do it in the morning, some do it in the evening. I suggest everybody attend those stand-up meetings. They really do give you a lot of information. They're just a quick 30-minute update on what is going on with the DR that day.
Sometimes it's really hard to go to the meetings because they're online, but if they do it at 5 o'clock and you're feeding the shelter at 5 o'clock, it's difficult.
Thank you so much. Thank you for answering all the questions. And Robin, I do see your other questions. I will send an email to you individually to follow up with those questions. Thank you all for attending. We'll see you next week, same time, same link. Next week, we're going to talk about battle rhythms. Thank you all. Have a great day. Thank you so much, Chris and Jane. Thank you.
Thanks everybody for showing up tonight. I appreciate it. Thanks,
Thank you.
Chris.